Hi, my name is Todd Berzer with Evolve Product Management. This is Product Management 101 and our lecture on customer analysis. In our last lectures, we've been talking about the work of product management, and we looked at the work across 4 different areas. The first is market intelligence, second strategy, third new product development, and finally lifecycle management. And in the last lecture, we talked about, and we've been talking about this section on market intelligence. And in the last lecture, we talked about market analysis. And in this lecture, we're going to be talking about customer analysis. And in particular, we're going to be looking at customers and their needs. So why should a product manager care? How to research these needs, how to analyze these needs, and then we're going to give an example. So let's start with customer needs. And what are customer needs? The customers or your potential customers, they're trying to solve an issue, they're trying to realize an opportunity, they're trying to satisfy their needs. And as a product manager, a deep understanding of customer needs, it guides our work in strategy, guides our work in new product development, guides our work in growth plans, pricing, sales efforts. And all of this leads to competitive differentiation and long-term profitability. Understanding customer needs, this kind of deep, intuitive understanding of your customers and their needs is really a foundational element of product management. So how do you identify these customer needs? And typically you do this through research, and it can be qualitative research, quantitative research, or maybe mining your big data. So we're going to talk about those 3 areas. In particular, we're going to focus on the qualitative area because it's just an absolutely critical area for product managers. But let's look at the overall picture between qualitative, quantitative, and big data. We've kind of graphed them out, just kind of put them out across a couple vectors here. On the x-axis, this is sample size. So how many people are you talking to? How many people are you researching? And N is your sample size. For qualitative research, tends to be pretty small. Qualitative research, you're really kind of doing one-on-one interviews, you're doing small group interviews. You can't talk to that many people and do in-depth interviews. So N, in this case, the number of your sample size might be 10 people, it might be 20 people, it might be up to 100 people. But it probably ends there. And for quantitative research, typically you reach out to a broader set. You're doing things like online surveys, and your sample size might be 100 people, it might be 200, it might be 1,000, maybe, you might get up to something as high as 10,000. And for big data, in this case, we say N is all or N is nearly all. So your sample size is almost every data point and every customer interaction. I mean, a good example is your retail sales data. So you might have, you would have a huge set potentially of retail sales data on your particular product, and that data is what you use for your big data analysis. So that's the x-axis. The y-axis, we look at correlation and causation. Correlation is when 2 factors kind of move in the same direction together. You don't necessarily know if one causes the other, or the first causes the second, or if they're completely caused by something else or completely unrelated. That's just correlation. It's just the what. On the other hand, the why, kind of understanding the reasons behind things, that's the causation, and that's really what qualitative research can help you do because of that more in-depth understanding of your customers. All right, so we're going to start with qualitative research, so let's start there. So qualitative research is a very common approach for product managers, and the goal is a deep understanding of the articulated and unarticulated needs from your customers. So what they can tell you and what they can't tell you, but they feel. So those are the needs that you want to kind of tease out. So what are the problems? Typically the questions that you're going to ask when you do these types of interviews, what you're looking for is what problems are they trying to solve? Why is it important to them? How are they solving this today? And what works, what doesn't work? What would they like to see in the future? So those are the types of questions that you can ask. Examples of this research are ethnographic research or customer visits. It's a very common one. And then focus groups, where you're talking not just one-on-one, but you're talking to a small group of 6 to 12 people in some kind of guided discussion format. Those are very common examples of qualitative research. Now we're going to take a look at now, we're going to dig into ethnographic research or customer visits because it's such a critical part of what product managers do. And such an excellent tool, I think, for any product manager. So let's take a look at ethnographic research. We're going to dig into this a little bit. So this is visiting your customers or your potential customers. And with any project, as a product manager, With any project that you're doing, you want to set your objectives. What are you trying to do? And in this case, set your research objectives. What do you want to understand? What do you want to research? And then you're going to need to screen and recruit your customers. So you want to find customers in your target market segment. And you should develop screening criteria to decide to filter out the people that you want and the people that you don't want. Now you don't want, I made a note here, you don't want too strict of a screening criteria. You want to hit the people that you want to talk to, but if you're so very tight in who you want to talk to, you might miss some bigger pictures, or miss the bigger picture activity of what's happening in your market. Now, it's a little bit tedious to kind of find and recruit these customers to go out and do customer visits, especially if you're going to a city and you want to visit 12, 20 customers. Market research firms can help you do that, sometimes for a very, very low price. They can help you recruit, set up the visits, and then you can go and do the research. Sales representatives and your channel partners can also help you link out to and find customers to talk to. This has a downside, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, once you've set up these visits and you go and talk to these people, you're going to need to develop a questionnaire, and you do that in advance. You ask open-ended questions. Remember, you're there to listen and observe. You're not there so much to talk other than just to guide the discussion. You're really wanting to hear their opinions, their perspective, get their needs. And the best thing to do is to interview them at their place of work. So in whatever way they're interacting with your product or your product category, that's the place that you want to talk to them at. Now you can talk to them you might go to, and that's typically, maybe it might be at their office. It might be at their desk, their very desk. You could talk to them in a boardroom, a corporate boardroom if you go to their company, but that's a little less effective. It's really nice to see them right at their actual workplace. And if you've got permission, take pictures, take video. They help you later on. And then you come back, you've done these visits, maybe you did 12 visits in each of 3 cities. You're going to have a large set of data, you're going to have a variety of data. You need to look for key themes, you need to spread it all out, look for surprises, look for insights. This is hard work, but this is the really, I think, brainy work of product management to really kind of understand your customers and their needs. And then you want to communicate broadly to your team and use your findings to guide your work and your team's approach. So that's ethnographic research, but I want to talk a little bit more just to give you a few tips and tricks for success on this one, again, because it's such an important tool for product managers. One of the things that really helps is if you work in cross-functional pairs. So, for example, yourself, a product manager, and your development counterpart, maybe an R&D manager. Also, you want to talk to as many customers as possible. You want to cast a broad net of customer types within your target customer segment. And if you've got customers in Germany, if you've got customers in Japan, if you've got customers in Canada, and they're all important, you should be talking to them. So when you ask questions, keep all the bias out of your voice, out of your language, out of your body language. You're not there to judge. You make no judgments while you're there. You're there to listen and observe. Any kind of judgment that you impose or you convey during the interview can bias the results. A few others, you're going to follow your script of your questionnaire script, but you're going to drill down when you hit gold. When you find something you really want to know about, go ahead and dig deeply on that one. I made a note that you need to be careful with sales reps. I mentioned this earlier. If you're there in an interview together with a sales representative or a channel partner, just remember that you guys have fundamentally different goals when you're talking to the customer. So as a product manager in this type of situation, you want to gather information. You want to understand their customer their needs, their opinions, their perspective, and you need to do that in a very unbiased way. The sales rep, on the other hand, is there to either solve a problem or and in particular, to make a sale. So they may respond to things that the customer said and want to answer or want to solve that problem. That doesn't help you with your research. So the way to do this is just ask the sales rep to let you manage the interview part of the discussion, and then afterwards, after you have gathered the data that you need, then the sales rep can discuss the things that they want to discuss. And then finally, you're going to get a lot of data from research like this. Capture your notes as quickly as possible, preferably right after the interview. Go ahead and just jot down your notes if you haven't done it during the interview itself. and then you can share your conclusions widely after that. So that's ethnographic research and qualitative research. So let's switch gears. Now let's talk about quantitative research. Now, quantitative research allows you to describe your customers and their needs in numbers and percents. So qualitative research is directional. We think most customers feel very strongly about price. Quantitative research can give you a much more firmer, can give you numbers behind that, can give you percents behind that. So we think customers, 67% of the customers feel very strongly that price is an important factor in their purchase decision. So these are the distinctions that you can make. Quantitative research allows you to do numbers and percents and projections on the market. Typically, quantitative research follows qualitative research. So qualitative research gives you an idea and understanding of the market. You now can speak the customer's language, and you can use that to help guide your survey development in quantitative research. Online surveys are a common method, and sometimes these types of surveys can be inexpensive. Sometimes they can be very expensive, and syndicated research through an industry analyst can sometimes help defray the cost for this, since they're selling their results to a number of companies. All right, that's quantitative research. Let's go to the third research category. That's big data. Now, in the past, 20, 30 years ago, data was very expensive. It was very expensive to gather. It was very precious. We now live in an era of just cheap data. We're just overwhelmed, inundated with data from all sorts of sources, from Google search, from Facebook, from Twitter, from maybe your retail purchases that you get, all the point of sales data, from e-commerce, from if you're managing a software product, from any kind of interaction with the customer, understanding and the data collected that you're collecting on software usage, your customer support data. So you can be awash in huge amounts of data. And typically this data can give you correlation, can talk about two factors that might be moving in the same direction, but it doesn't tell you the why. It's really the qualitative research that does that. I'll give you an example. Walmart, the U.S. retail chain, mine their big data, their sales data, and they know from doing that when a hurricane is approaching the southeast part of the United States, there's a big surge in flashlight sales. Now that makes sense. You can kind of intuitively understand the reason for that. The electricity might go out. They want a flashlight. They want a torch to kind of see their way around. A second thing that they didn't expect was that Pop-Tarts, which are a sweet breakfast pastry, that spiked as well. The sales of that spiked as well. Now that was a surprise, and maybe you could intuitively think that people want high-calorie, high-sugar foods in a time when they might not be able to cook food in kind of a tough weather condition. So it makes sense after you think about that, but in advance they didn't know that. So they discovered that flashlights and Pop-Tarts, both from their big data, from mining of that those are two examples of high sales items that happen in kind of inclement weather conditions. So if you've got big data on your products, and you probably do, use it, find it, mine that data, and understand your customer needs through that. So after you've captured your customer needs through market research, you need to do a couple of things. One is to categorize and prioritize those needs, and the second is to compare those, and potentially you're going to need to compare those across segments as well. So if we think about categorizing and prioritizing those customer needs, really digging into and understanding them and learning how to use them, we're going to talk about something called the Kano model. And this was developed by Noriaki Kano, a professor in Japan. He released an influential paper in 1984 together with his colleagues. And it's now since been called the Kano model. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's a couple of different axes to talk about. First of all, if you have fulfilled a customer need or not, that's what the x-axis is. So you've fulfilled a need, or you haven't done it, or you've done it poorly, or you've done it very well. That's what the x-axis is. And then what was the customer's response? Were they disgusted or were they delighted? So we're going to map customer needs across these different areas. The first one is, and there's three different categories we're going to talk about. So we're going to kind of classify our customer needs into these three different categories. And the first one is the basic needs. So these are really we call them the must-be requirements. These are the requirements that if you do not meet these requirements, the customers will be disgusted. If you meet these requirements, they will say, well, of course, that's what I expected. It's not necessarily that you win extra points or extra credit by meeting these requirements. It's just something you have to do. Easiest way to understand this is through an airline example. I used to live in Sydney, Australia. We flew to our regional office in Singapore quite a bit, and I took Qantas Airlines. So if you think about an airline, I usually didn't check baggage, but if you do check baggage, and if I arrived in Singapore and the bags weren't there, I would be disgusted. I need my bags, I need my clothing. So that's a basic need. However, if my bags arrived, I'm not giving Qantas extra credit for that. I mean, it's just what I expected. So that's an example of a basic need. Now let's go to a performance need. So in this case, these are the areas in particular that you, if you're looking at your own products, will be competing with your competitors. So these are areas that you kind of compete for customer attention, for customer interest, and typically more is better. So, if we think about the airline example again, I'm in the plane, the food comes, it's very nice food on Qantas, we get very nice customer service, there's a nice cabin atmosphere. Those are all aspects of kind of the quality of service, and that's an example of a performance need. Or, on the other hand, how much did I pay for that ticket? So price is another performance need. Okay? And then finally, there are the attractive needs, the delighters. So these are often unspoken, and they're not expected. So if you don't do them, if you don't meet these attractive needs, you're okay. However, if you meet them, or you supply your customers with one or two items that are attractive needs, you're going to delight them. So again, in our airline example, if I buy economy class tickets, if I'm in an economy class seat and I get upgraded to business class or first class, I wasn't expecting that, but absolutely delighted when it happens. That's an example of an attractive need. So those three needs kind of are a way to look at all your customer needs and kind of divide them up into some critical categories. And we're going to talk later about what to do with those categories, especially as you develop new products or new services. But that's the Kano model. And then you may also, in another analysis of your customer needs, you may need to look across segments. So you may need to look at how a certain segment, in this case segment 1, compares to segment 2 or segment 3. And you can do this with the use of a radar diagram. Here we've got the different user needs. Maybe one is quality, maybe one's price, maybe one's speed, performance, whatever. You could map those different needs on the outside, the internal axes, and then map your customers there against how important those particular needs are. So let's say user need A is price. Let's say that's performance or speed. Segment 2, in this case, feels very strongly about that. That's a critical, important element to them. Segment 1, however, does not see that as important. So a way to compare customer needs across segments using the radar diagram. Now let's give an example. If, as we talked about, a deep understanding of customer needs is just a foundational element of product management, you just have to do it. And if you're a product manager for office chairs, you need to know how people sit. So this is Steelcase and their gesture chair. So we're going to give an example here. Steelcase did some nice work, and the product managers did some good work. They did research, as we talked about, research worldwide, I think 11 countries, over 2,000 people they talked to, and they wanted to know, how do people sit? Now you can think about how you're sitting right now. Are you forward? Are you hunched back? Are you kind of just taking it all in? How are you sitting in your chair? So what they found is that with new technology, with smartphones, with tablets, and of course your computer in front of you, people are sitting differently than they used to. And they developed these 9 sitting positions. So the draw, the multi-device, the text, the cocoon, the swipe, the smart lean. They developed these 9 types of sitting, the ways that people sit. So I think they did some nice research here. This research then goes on, we'll talk about this a little later, into their product development. cycle as well as into their introduction and launch period. So I think Steelcase did some nice work here of understanding their user needs around how people sit. And as they say, they ended up building a chair, the Steelcase gesture chair, built for all the new positions of office work. All right, so let's review the concepts. In this lecture, we talked about customer needs and why we care about them. And then we talked about the 3 types of research. So qualitative, quantitative, and big data. We did a special focus on ethnographic research because it's just a critical part of your tool set as a product manager. We looked at ways of analyzing customer needs. The Kano model is a big one there, so that's a great one to learn to use. And we gave an example. All right, so our next lecture is on competitive analysis, and I will talk to you then.